Let's try again. Calling all Fox fans. Calling all Fox fans. We're trying again. Sorry for the technical problems. Completely out of my hands today. Oh, Mango's back in first this time. And Orange. There's the lad. Hey up, Orange. Nice to see thee. Good stuff. Shannon's third. Teresa fourth. Shumpike fifth. Thanks so much for rejoining. Appreciate it. Aussie in sixth. Yeah, Mango was first this time, and Orange flew in second. Shannon third. Teresa fourth. Shumpike fifth. Joe's in sixth. Let's see who else comes back in, and then I'm just gonna give it a couple of minutes just to hopefully allow people to come back in. For those of you that want to come back in. So could you not hear me at all, by the way? Like, when we tried to have the restart and we had a lot of you back in the chat, but you just had a black screen, but you couldn't even hear me either, right? It was just me talking to myself for a little while. I mean, at least I wasn't talking about anything interesting. Shunpike, you were fifth this time. It doesn't always look right on your screen, which was proven when Teresa and Shannon were fighting over this last week in a friendly way, of course. And Teresa, I could see on your screen, like, it looked like you were first, but your timer was actually 1 minute after Shannon's timer. And then when I looked at the specific information on my stream, I think you actually joined in the same minute, but it was something like half a second after Shannon wrote that message that you managed to get your message. And it can just be to do with connections as well. Obviously, like, if someone's just got a stronger connection for whatever reason, it gets it through to YouTube faster, even if you typed it first, you know. It was always like that when I was really into online gaming. If you've got a faster setup, you know, you can actually, say you were playing Call of Duty or Battlefield or something, you can shoot someone second, but you actually get the hit before them just because they've got a weaker internet connection. It's the strangeness of the internet. Yeah, so I was just buffering, then a black screen. Very sad, Mango, so you couldn't hear anything at all. But it was just me crying to myself, so don't worry about that. And, yes, Olivia is back as well, and Jutang is back as well, and Claire, and Colour Brights, and Laurie, and Danielle has come in, just oblivious of all the madness. Welcome to Danielle, nice to see you. And I'm guessing this is Danielle from Patreon. I think I've only got one Danielle on Patreon. I'm guessing it is, and thank you for all your messages. I actually owe you a couple of replies. But just know that I do get everything and appreciate it very, very, very much. I just saw that my chat box wasn't working again, so I've refreshed that. That should be working fine. And hello to Kim, the Aussie admin from Facebook is coming in from Facebook. That's really nice. Welcome, Kim. Hope you're doing all right. And hello to Gavin as well, Lord of the Rings fan. I see. I know you've been around for a long time as well, Gavin. Nice to see you in a book club. And Lynette is back as well. You've just missed rubbish internet. That's all you've missed, Lynette. We've got a different text colour as well. We had purple for a little while, and now we've got an orangey red. That'll do. Okay, so we've got a little bunch of you back, and I'm just going to crack on with the reading now. No more messing about. It's already taken me much, much longer than I hoped to get started. Much, much longer than I hoped. So let's get on with some To Marry a Prince. And anybody that joins once I've started reading, please just give them a Fox fan welcome in the chat. And we'll take it from there. So, sadly, this will get split into 2 videos now on my channel. But we'll just have had that first little 20 minutes in the first video as the welcome chat. And then this is all about just getting stuck in with the reading. So, it did take the wind out of my sails a little bit, I must admit, those technical frustrations there for 10 minutes or so. But I'm sure I'll settle into some To Marry a Prince after a few minutes. Yeah, no witches today, Mango. We had an absolute witch fest yesterday. My vocal cords did get a little bit fried. So, witches probably back tomorrow. I'll aim for that. But it was wonderful to see you enjoying it so much yesterday. And thanks very much, Gavin. I will be cracking on with the 3rd book of Lord of the Rings very soon. But for today, we've got some To Marry a Prince and maybe some George Orwell too. We will see. Oh, very nice to see you here too, Kim. I'm sorry, my little multi-stream box is not working again today. It was for a couple of the streams last week. But yeah, I'm keep missing some of the Facebook chat. So sorry about that. But great to have you in the stream, Kim. It's really, really nice. Yeah. I don't always like to do the same book 2 days in a row as well. It's nice to mix it up just a little bit. What, catch you up with the plot, Jake? Do you mean? I don't know where to start. It's kind of what you see on the tin is what you've got inside the tin. Exactly what it says on the tin. So, To Marry a Prince, it's about a normal lady who's very middle class, very upper middle class maybe even, by the sounds of her very posh Granny Georgia, who meets and doesn't realise she's meeting because she's not tuned into the tabloids in that way. Can't blame her, but she doesn't realise that she's bumped into only the heir apparent, the Prince of England, Richard, at a party. Don't even realise. And she's fallen over some plant pots, she's covered in soil, and Mr. Whiteshirt, as Sophie Page describes him, is being the elegant gentleman helping her up. And I'm not going to say it's love at first sight. There's a little bit of a Pride and Prejudice vibe there. A bit of a Mr. Darcy Elizabeth sort of thing. Not as exaggerated as that. But they sort of keep in touch a little bit. There's some dating going on. And then we're just kind of crashing into the difficulties that I imagine Katie and William encountered. Little humble brag. I think I've mentioned this before, but I just find it amusing that I've mentioned this before. I know I have mentioned this before. But Prince William and I went to the same university up in Scotland, St Andrews. And that's where he met Katie. And William was also studying the same course as me there, geography. So we have the same degree, the same grade actually, in the same degree. And that's where he met Katie. And this is sort of what To Marry a Prince is following. So it's a love story, but it's also showing like how mad it must be being in this sort of situation. A regular person dating a royal, and the humour, the silliness, but also like the sort of like quite scary aspect of it all, really, you know, with the paparazzi and the journalists, and how you're received by the royals, and whether this whole thing can work, and all the rest of it. But it's very nicely written, tongue-in-cheek. I think there's like a little bit of a Sex in the City Bridget Jones's Diary, Love Actually kind of vibe, and it's very well put together. So I'm gonna get stuck in. Lynette's happy for some Orwell. That's nice. Hopefully the video isn't lagging. Laurie's seeing it lagging. I hope it's not. Shannon says it's smooth. Yeah, I think it predates that colour. It's the same sort of idea as Meghan and Harry, but it's more of a William and Kate, I would say. It's been around quite a while as this book, actually. I don't remember what year it was published, but before Harry and Meghan. It was very much on the back of the Kate and Will. Oh, and welcome back. I really want to know how to pronounce your name. I called you our Russian friends before. I hope that wasn't derogatory. But welcome back to the stream. Have I missed anybody else who's made it in? I'm not sure. But I'm going to get started. I'm just having a sip of coffee. And then I'm going to jump in. Oh, Claire. This is a different Claire, right? But I'm sure you've got the same picture. Is that Claire B, who's now Claire Quinn? Such confusion. It doesn't take much to confuse me. Yeah, it was very much during the Kate and William dating period. No, we weren't there at the same time. He was there, I think 3 years before me, something like that. But we'll have had some of the same lecturers and been in the same lecture halls and things. It's very silly, but true. And a fun fact that I didn't know until the other day was his sort of covert nickname among friends and things whilst he was at St Andrews, so that they could talk about him without journalists knowing who they were talking about. His nickname was Steve. Just like me. Kind of fun. Oh, cheers, Orange. That's really, really, really nice of you to translate that. That's cool. I was like checking it back and I was like, okay, is that? Yeah. But thank you. Oh, and you've mentioned it as well. Barbara. Oh, you didn't need to retract your message, Orange. It was fine. No, it was really helpful. Thanks very much for that. Oh, so welcome to Barbara. Good times. Okay, I'm firing it up. Oh, I realised that the Discorders, a couple of the Discorders are stranded. But Shannon's helping out. Thanks very much. So hopefully Tora and Katie can get back in the stream as well. It seems like a few of you haven't managed to get back in yet. No, don't worry, Claire. Don't worry about it. It's just there's another Ms. Quinn that follows me as well. So it makes it extra confusing, but don't worry. Oh, good times, Jake. But yeah, we had quite a big bunch before the disconnect. And I feel like there's a few of you that have got stranded on the other side of the internet, but never mind. Yeah, some people are refreshing the old stream, which is just not going to work. You need to quit that one and come back into a new one. It's a bit frustrating, to say the least. But never mind. Oh, and welcome back to Michael. Hi there, Michael. Thanks for rejoining. But yes, never mind. Technical issues happen. It's just one of those things. And this one, at least, was out of my hands. Don't know what happened, but it was definitely internet related. Okay, so on with the show. And this is Sophie Page's To Marry a Prince, Chapter 13. Can this last? Royal Watchers magazine. The entrance to Camelford House was more forbidding than the palace's, with huge blank black gates. But once inside, it felt a lot smaller and a great deal friendlier. The gates opened as soon as Richard's car approached and closed noiselessly behind it, as a security officer came out of the small guardhouse to check them in. "Good evening, sir. I don't have a guest on my list for tonight, sir." "Spur of the moment, Fred. Bella, meet Fred, who keeps the bad men out. Fred, this is my lady, Bella Greenwood. I've no doubt you know all about her by now." Fred smiled. "Very nice to meet you, miss. I'll add Miss Greenwood to the approved visitors list, shall I, sir?" "You bet. Good night, Fred." "Good night, sir. Miss." Richard drove round a corner into a sort of square formed by a substantial 18th century house, a small Jacobean block, and what looked like a 19th century schoolhouse, its front covered in ivy. "You'll need to check in with security whenever you come here if you're not with me. If I'm not around, just poke your head through the guardhouse door and the guys will sign you in. You'll need keys, too. I'll organise that." He led the way into what Bella was privately thinking of as the schoolhouse. Inside it was warmer and more comfortable than the palace. The ceilings were lower, and the art was less warlike. There was even an elevator, with gilded bars and a leather-covered bench seat around 3 sides of it. Richard flung open the doors for her. "You must take a ride in Gertrude. Don't look down if you get vertigo, but Gertrude is a work of art. They wanted to put in something modern and silent that opened straight into my apartment, but I said no. She's part of my childhood, Gertrude." He patted the leather seat as if it were a friendly dog, and swung the hands of a floor indicator as big as a grandfather clock face. Gertrude clanked into life and juddered sedately to the top floor. Richard's apartment was a shock. Bella had seen him in someone else's cottage, in Lottie's flat, and in the shared houseboat. All those places were friendly, book-filled, cosy. This flat was enormous. The main room ran the entire length of the building as far as she could see, with a pale blonde wood floor and minimalist furniture. Deep ivy-coloured sofas surrounded a low wooden table inlaid with an intricate pattern of pale woods. There was a cocktail cabinet at one end, currently closed up to reveal its flowing Art Deco lines, and a floor-to-ceiling bookcase at the other. No flowers or knickknacks here, but a spotlit alcove housing a beautiful urn, the colour of the sunlit stone of the Acropolis, and a huge painting occupying the whole of one wall. At first glance, it looked like a black-and-white architectural study of a ruined castle in the middle of a medieval town. But the longer you looked at it, the more you saw anomalies. Tiny touches of colour, staircases that couldn't possibly exist, hints of people just out of sight. A shoe, a drifting scarf. "That," said Bella, staring, "is amazing." He stood beside her and looked too. "I never tire of it. Every time I see something different." He put an arm round her. "The palace is full of stuff. People are always giving you things, and some of my ancestors were avid collectors too. And you never throw anything away, on principle, in case the next generation would like it. So my mother lives in an upmarket junkyard and tries to hide it with flowers. I didn't want that." "You haven't got it. This is beautiful." There were windows all along another wall. She went to them, and saw that they looked out across lawns to another building. "Is that part of Camelford House too?" He shook his head. government building. So you're in this great big place all on your own? His eyes started to dance in the way she loved, the way they hadn't for too long. He took her hand and pulled her towards him. Not, he said, tonight. It was a good start, but things went wrong almost immediately. Richard had to leave to take a flight to Edinburgh the next morning, so he left before Bella did. And no one had told her that she had to sign out when she left Camelford House. So, in the middle of the day, she got a frantic phone call from someone in Richard's entourage of the day, asking her to call the guardhouse. She did, and a meticulous functionary insisted that she come back at once and sign out. She would do well to apologise to the officer of the watch as well, he said. Bella suspected that he was the officer of the watch. But she remembered that these were people whom Richard saw every day, and liked, so she complied. Then she had a call from someone who described himself as working in the King's private office. Please would she give him her date of birth, her social security number, and her passport number, also her parents and her stepfathers, and in future would she remember that it was not permitted to stay overnight in a royal residence without 3 days prior notice. They're not exactly making you feel welcome, are they? Said Lottie, hearing Bella's side of that particular conversation. I know, it's odd. Both the King and Queen Jane were very nice to me. But she rounded up the passport numbers as instructed. You know, I think you ought to check with Richard, said Lottie. I mean, it's odd. Maybe Wormtongue doesn't work for the King at all. What's his name? Maddock. Julian Maddock. Well, find out if Mr. Maddock is legit before you send him anything. So, for once, Bella called Richard. He answered immediately. How's day 2 of being the first girlfriend going? Odd, actually. And she told him about the messages she'd had from the palace. He exploded. Bloody Maddock! A vicious little toad. Know what he's doing, don't you? He's trying to get you positively vetted. Bella gasped, coughed, and couldn't stop laughing. Sounds a bit agricultural and rather nasty. But Richard wasn't amused. It's security clearance for people who've had to raid government secrets. How dare he? How dare he? But Bella was still bubbling with mirth. She went into a very bad Russian accent. I am Olga, the beautiful spy. You will tell me all your secrets. Richard laughed reluctantly. Yes, very funny. But Maddock needs kicking. I shall speak to my father. What else has the House of Horrors thrown at you today, my love? She told him about the officer of the watch, and her decision to grovel without protest. I look on it as an investment in future goodwill. He groaned. And I thought it would be the press that were the problem. Well, I'll probably do better now. Your mother is providing me with a mentor. Oh, what? A mentor. You know, someone who's already done something and guides the faltering footsteps of a new recruit. Hell's teeth, he said blankly. The woman's got a mind like a corkscrew. Has she really wished one of my old girlfriends onto you? Bella giggled at the idea. I don't think so. She's called Lady Pansy, and when she called me this morning, she sounded like Celia Johnson. Must be a good 75. Oh, Pansy. He sounded more relaxed. She's harmless. She'll probably give you long lectures about orders of precedence and teach you how to curtsy. Coo. This time Richard laughed as if he really meant it. I love you, he said before ringing off. Dream girl. Lady Pansy didn't give Bella lectures on orders of precedence. She gave her a booklet bound in shiny royal blue with the royal coat of arms on the front and gold lettering, and a book on protocol at the court of St. James's, revised edition, and a book on the royal families of Europe, plus a ring binder about the organisation of the royal household, London, with the internal telephone numbers of, as far as Bella could see, everything and everyone from the King's private office to the head groom. Just a few memory joggers, she said sweetly, for Lady Pansy was very sweet indeed. Bella found her way to a sitting room off a back staircase in the palace for, as she thought, a friendly chat, and came away feeling as if she had gone 10 rounds with the Cookie Monster. The woman who had summoned her was tall and rangy, with a profile like a horse's and a lacquered back-combed helmet of beautifully tinted grey-brown hair that would, thought Bella, have withstood a force 10 gale. She was elegantly dressed in a dark blue dress and short jacket, worn with a triple string of pearls, matching pearl earrings, and a pair of well-polished shoes. So far, so golfing ladies, except that Lady Pansy smiled all the time and never stopped talking. She did not so much gush as swirl like the tide. She was, in short, unstoppable. She also called Bella dear a lot. It set Bella's teeth on edge. I have known the dear Queen since she came here as a bride, and the Dowager Queen before her. Indeed, I was brought up with His Majesty's father. My own father was what is called an enquiry. You'll find out about that in the court here. And she added another tome to Bella's extensive pile. Thank you. Of course. I have retired now. The King has very kindly given me a little grace and favour apartment in Hampton Court, but I come into the palace most days to give what service I can. Old habits die hard. She had a tinkling laugh that didn't sit very well with the horse-like teeth or a strident upper-class voice that could have stripped paint. I suppose they must, murmured Bella. Royal service is my inheritance. I'm very proud to serve. I have my little corner here, Lady Pansy explained, indicating a sitting room the size of a suburban house, full of 18th century furniture and a goodish collection of porcelain. And I am always available to help new people who join the court with any little pieces of advice that I can. Just ask me anything you like, dear. My card. My phone number. She gave Bella 2 small pasteboard cards, one simply inscribed with Lady Pansy's name in flowing gold script, one more businesslike with phone and fax numbers, but no email address. You will find it all bewildering at first, instructed Lady Pansy, but I shall be here to guide you. You may call on me at any time. I suggest we meet regularly. Taking a surreptitious glance at her watch, Bella realised that the interview had already taken 2 hours. Her discussions with Lady Pansy, she resolved, would henceforward take place on the telephone. But she murmured more grateful thanks, and Lady Pansy launched into a terrifying account of the hounding she could expect from the press. Bella finally staggered out with 2 cloth bags full of books and papers 3 hours after she'd gone into the palace. She went straight back to the flat and lay down in the sitting room in blessed silence. "Thank God I took the day off," she told Lottie that evening. "The woman made my head ring and scared the wits out of me. She made me think the journalists and photographers would be knee-deep outside the flat, but there wasn't one." As it turned out, the press were relatively uninterested in Bella. There were a couple of pointed questions asked of Richard at his next public appearance, but he evaded them neatly. And a single photographer turned up outside Bella's office, but that was it. "Of course, you're not one of the candidates to become his princess," explained Lady Pansy on the telephone. "The serious royal correspondents know that and won't waste their time. But the riff-raff can be intrusive. When would you like to call on me this week?" "Thank you, but I think I will save that pleasure for when the riff-raff gets worse," said Bella, and put the phone down before Lady Pansy could object. Lottie, however, agreed with the courtier. "There's a lot of celebrity action at the moment," she said darkly. "You wait till the dead zone between Christmas and New Year. That's when we'll get all the pieces about Isabella Greenwood. Is she right for our prince?" "So what?" said Bella, who had just come off the phone with Richard and was still basking in his "Good night, dream girl." "I've got my love to keep me warm. I can handle it." She and Lottie were both wrong. The trouble started when an undercover freelance journalist approached Bella's mother in town. Of course, she didn't say she was a journalist. She said she'd heard the news about Bella and the Prince of Wales and just had to stop and tell Janet how pleased she was. And then she switched on her mini tape recorder and let Janet burble. Bella's mother didn't say anything untruthful. She said that they hadn't met Prince Richard yet, but hoped to soon. She also said they were very much looking forward to meeting the King and Queen. At this point, reading the article, Bella put her arms over her head and groaned loudly. And that she hoped to invite Queen Jane, a noted amateur golfer, to a round at her own club. Yes, she agreed, it would be lovely if Bella and Richard got married. Following your heart was so important. Only then the journalist asked if she thought that the family would object, and Janet got completely the wrong end of the stick. Her ex-husband, she said, could keep his silly opinions to himself and not jeopardize his daughter's happiness. Who cared whether he thought the monarchy should be abolished or not? He was never in the country anyway. It went round the wires in seconds. The next day, a journalist turned up in Cambridge, asking about Finn's behaviour when he was an undergraduate there. Someone found an incendiary article he had written as a student coming back from Paris, praising the French événements of 1968. A man he had fallen out with badly on his Pamiers expedition sold a highly coloured account of Finn's alleged anarchist ravings while they were in the mountains together. The headlines were grim. "Prince woos revolutionary's daughter" was the mildest of them. "Trotskyist totty in the palace" screamed the Daily Dispatch. Julian Maddock rang Bella and asked her for a list of all the clubs and societies she'd ever joined, particularly any political ones. He was, he said in a smug voice, commanded by the king to ask. Lady Pansy said it was most unfortunate, and that Bella should issue a statement distancing herself from her father. "Can't do that," said Lottie the guru. "Turns you into a sneaky little traitor, letting your dad down." "I wasn't going to do it," said Bella, more bewildered than anything else. Richard was furious. A television interviewer stuck a microphone in his face at a Christmas fair, and he lost his cool. "I am a great admirer of Finn Greenwood's work," he told a reporter icily. "I have read all his books. It would be a privilege to meet him." "Prince turns anarchist," trumpeted the Daily Dispatch. "Oh, dear," said Lady Pansy, worried. "Maybe you ought not to see each other. Just for a bit, you know, until all this dies down." But Bella was starting to get annoyed too. "The trouble is, people who buy the Dispatch can't read. They probably thought it said Antichrist," she said tartly. And somehow that got out into the press too. There were rumblings that the first girlfriend was too big for her boots. Not being royal, or even aristocratic, and sneering at the reading abilities of good working people. "Now I'm not only a trot, I'm toffee-nosed," she told Richard, trying to make a joke of it. But it was starting to hurt. She did not go to any official functions with him, and when they went to the same parties, they arrived and left separately. It seemed to her now they had acknowledged that they were seeing each other. They saw less of each other than they had when it was only in snatched secret moments. "I know," said Richard. They were in his flat again, curled up together on the huge sofa after a long walk and a lazy evening with a DVD. "It's like there's a conspiracy to keep us apart." Bella propped herself up on one elbow. "Do you think?" But at once they both shook their heads. No, why would anyone bother? "If I have the choice between cock-up and conspiracy, I go for cock-up every time," said Richard. "We need to spend time together, private time, that everyone knows about. I can't get away from Christmas, but I could do the Saturday after next if your mother invited me. And you could come to Scotland for the New Year." "Do you think that's wise? Lady Pansy said maybe we should cool it." "Pansy's an old worry-guts," said Richard disrespectfully. "I'm not feeling like cooling anything." He kissed Bella long and pleasurably to illustrate the point. After a long, complicated interlude, she could only agree with him. "Right," he said later, lying half-naked and wholly relaxed on his priceless Chinese carpet. "That's agreed, then. You square your parents. I'll tell mine." 36 hours entertaining the Prince of Wales on her own territory was all Janet Bray had ever dreamed of. She paraded him round the golf club, and he behaved, as Bella told him later with heartfelt appreciation, like a complete star. He laughed at all their golf stories, even producing a couple of his own. He admired their charitable fundraising, expressed interest in the club's upcoming centenary, and spent long, cold hours on the fairway playing around with Kevin and smiling for the local paper. The curious and children who came along hoping that the Prince of Wales would be in armour, or at least have a sword. His smile never faltered. Nobody would ever have guessed that he wasn't riveted by golf and golfers, or delighted with his day's entertainment. "You're really good at this, aren't you?" Bella said, walking beside him back to the clubhouse, her gloved hand tucked into the crook of his arm. "It's my job," he said. Janet's stock had soared with the ladies' section. "Good to meet the boyfriend that our Bella said she didn't have," said the witch-faced social secretary, making certain that she was the first to shake Richard's hand when they reached the clubhouse. Her husband's new knighthood, as she had pointed out in the ladies' cloakroom, gave her precedence. It is a great treat to be here with her," said Richard, retrieving his hand and flexing it out of sight. The lady social secretary's Botox did not seem to have frozen her iron grip. Such a privilege to meet family friends. Janet sent him a look of utter devotion, and he smiled back at her. "Hope you'll be here for the spring dance," said the captain of the ladies' section. She had changed out of her golfing clothes into a snazzy cocktail number and was giving it lots of cleavage and flashing eyes. "It sounds delightful," Richard assured her, avoiding the cleavage like a professional. "Do you play darts?" said Janet, with an indignant look at the Mercedes driving hurry, and swept him off to the ladies' bar, where he had a very jolly time, allowing himself to lose by not too much in matches against the junior mums until Janet relented and took them home for dinner. She had wanted to invite her usual complement of guests, but Bella had begged her not to. "Let it just be us, Ma, just this once. Ask Neil and Val if you like, but nobody else." Janet was disappointed. "But I was going to hire a butler." "No." It was a cry of anguish. "But it must be what he's used to." Bella sat her down in the kitchen and took both her hands. "Ma, this is me. Forget him. Me. If he were anyone else, would you hire a butler? Did you hire a butler when Neil brought Val home?" "No," said Janet, struck. "Well then, just treat him like you treated Val. Please. I just want us to be normal for once." "You're a funny girl," said Janet, succumbing to her desperate tone. "But if that's what you want, darling, of course." So, supper was for the 6 of them. Neil and Val had driven over from Dorset, but after a good meal and plenty of wine, they would not be driving back again. Which made redundant the nice problem of whether Janet should allow Richard and Bella to sleep together under her roof. The Brays had 2 fully appointed guest rooms with an ensuite shower. Neil and Val would have one, Bella the other. There was also a box room which doubled as Janet's sewing room and was full of spooky dressmakers' dummies and rolls of fabric. And there was Kevin's study. Kevin, who had given silent thanks to be relieved of the burden of a butler, was enough of a traditionalist to suggest that you couldn't put the Prince of Wales on a couch in the study. "Bella couldn't go on the couch?" mused Janet doubtfully. Don't think he'd like that. Not very chivalrous. So Janet had given in, and Richard was to share Bella's room and ensuite shower room. Thanks, she muttered to Kevin as she passed him in the hallway. We owe you. It turned into a fun party. In the end, Neil pushed a coffee table into the middle of the floor and taught them all how to row to Viking rhythm. Kevin threw himself into the part, roaring out what he swore were Anglo-Saxon incantations. Even Val joined in, looking happier and more at home than Bella had ever seen her. And when they all said good night, Richard kissed Janet's cheek with genuine affection. I like your mother, he told Bella, sitting on the end of the bed to take his socks off. She's scared, but she's still in there, punching her weight. Bella was sliding out of the dress her mother had bought her last month, but paused on hearing that. Janet had been so pleased to see her in that Bella completely forgot the thing made her look like a middle-aged golf wife. What do you mean she's scared? What has she got to be scared of? Kevin takes care of everything. No, he doesn't, said Richard. He can't take care of her getting things wrong, being ignored, becoming a laughingstock. Bella dismissed that, half angry at the idea. Don't be ridiculous. But hadn't her mother said, I wish I were competent like you? I told you, love, this is my job. I meet people who are scared of doing or saying the wrong thing all the time. And believe me, Janet's a bad case. She's terrified. Nonsense. Didn't you see her when we were all playing Vikings this evening? She was never quite sure whether she was doing the right thing by joining in. Not sure we wanted her. Not sure she wasn't pushing in and spoiling it. Wondering whether she ought to be making coffee while the rest of us did what people like us do. Bella sat down on her side of the bed. No, she said, but not because she still disbelieved him. Oh, poor Ma. Richard turned and gathered her up into his arms, as if he knew she needed comforting. She's like her daughter. She's brave. She took a chance and joined in. You're quite a psychologist, aren't you? She said slowly. But he shook his head. I'm not anything. I just know what I see. Bella leaned against him, muzzy from wine and the pent-up anxieties of the last weeks. And you're kind. So very kind. He let her go, flipped down her bra strap, and said in quite another voice, also a half-trained Viking and randy as hell, get your clothes off, woman. And that is the end of chapter 13. Thank you for listening, everybody. That was a fun end to chapter 13. Just on the hint of raciness, as Tamari Prince likes to get from time to time. A nice chapter. A relatively long one. They can be quite long sometimes, the Tamaria Prince chapters. I hope it gave you time to settle into the reading. Sorry for a few mistakes there. I know you always tell me that I don't need to apologise, but there was a few more mistakes in chapter 13 than there had been in 11 and 12, but that's just how it is sometimes. But I really hope you enjoyed it, and that you're enjoying the story. I certainly am. I thought that was another very nice chapter, just moving the plot on a little, introducing a nice, fun character as well with Pansy. And I do like these little scenes with the mum and dad as well, with Bella's parents, or mum and stepdad, sorry. Yeah, I thought that was a nice chapter, so I really hope you enjoyed it. I really, 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 at the end of one of the scenes, I really, really briefly just popped back in to the chat just to check that you were all still here, because I was worried about the internet connection. And I was relieved to see that you're all here and doing fine. So hopefully the stream's been working smoothly. We've not had any problems. And nice to see Kim in the chat. You're still here. Sorry to hear you've been having insomnia though, Kim. But at least you're finding this soothing, a little bit distracting. Maybe it'll help you just to get some sleep tonight. Oh, that's nice, Claire. Nice recommendation there. I'm not sure if you've tried The Secret Garden, Kim. A lot of people find that one one of my most relaxing reads. And I'd have to agree, I think. Obviously, you've got the Harry Potters on the Google Drive. You should still have access to those. There's a couple of other quite calm ones as well. I think the Guest Cat is very calming. That's on the $5 audio library. The audio quality is poor. It's one of these really old ones recorded on my old mobile phone. But it's a very calm, relaxing story, I think. Yeah, it's not a particularly famous story, this one, Colour Bright, so I'm not surprised you've not heard of it. And for those of you that are not aware, I've mentioned it many times, but this one, Tamari Prince, is a commission through Patreon for Teresa, you see. So I'd never heard of Tamari Prince either, but it was brought to my attention by Teresa, you see. But great that you're enjoying the reading. Oh, and you're very welcome. Was it Barbara? I need to just translate it in my head now. Oh, that's nice, Olivia. Yeah, but I do too. I think it's a quite a soothing one, and I try to focus on that aspect of it with the reading. I'm sure there's certain times where I've got a little bit more carried away and things like that, but that's what's going on in the back of my mind. Focusing on it being fun and quite light-hearted and hopefully quite relaxing. Oh, that's very kind, Kim. Thanks ever so much. Don't you worry at all. Don't you worry at all. But that's lovely to hear. I'll check that out later on and send you a message. Thanks ever so much, Jake. Yeah, it seems to be a real popular one, that The Secret Garden. And for those of you that don't know, it was originally shared in 16 original videos that I called Raw Reading, and I chatted. It was a sort of a precursor to the Red Fox Book Club, actually. So it wasn't live, but it had that sort of style. So I chatted for 5-10 minutes at the start, maybe answering a couple of questions that I'd had in the YouTube comments. Then I read a chapter, often had a brief break, maybe just mentioned something about the previous chapter, then often read a second, and then chatted a little bit at the end and signed off in the whole read to you soon way that become mandatory. And yeah, for those of you that have got access to the $5 Google Drive on Patreon, you can listen to all those episodes there. I had them on the original Stephen Garnett channel, and then I had them on redfoxvoice, but I don't have them here. I just have the complete audiobook that I mashed up and added that lovely piece by Tchaikovsky. But those little snippets that you get in between the chapters in the complete audiobook of The Secret Garden, where I'm saying, oh, wasn't that lovely, and let's have another chapter, they're edited from Raw Reading. So they're little original snippets from this whole Raw Reading series. And the whole Raw Reading thing, that was me just trying something slightly different. So as I'd been reading more and more and becoming a little bit more accomplished as a narrator, still back in those early days, but my readings were becoming more polished and more edited. And I'd had Harry Potter struck off my original channel with copyright. So Raw Reading was a way of sort of revisiting my original style of reading from the book, as I did with The Hobbit, where you can hear the pages rustling, and just having the focus on a sort of genuine being read to straight out of the book experience rather than a more polished audiobook experience. So I still edited it in places and cut out any glaring mistakes and things like that. But those original Raw Reading episodes of The Secret Garden, it was pretty much just as it came off the pages. And that's why those first few chapters, they're a little more rough around the edges. You know, I might not always just get the emphasis in the right place, and there could be a couple of mistakes that survive and things like that, even though I've gone over it again and re-edited it again. But then as the series went on, I just couldn't help. I was getting really into the book, and I just couldn't help editing it a little bit more. So the chapters, as they go on, they get a little bit more polished. And I also improved my microphone during the series as well, so the sound quality improves a little bit as well. But it still stands as a very popular one, my reading of The Secret Garden, which is really, really lovely. I had no idea when I was just very casually really reading that out of the book a couple of years ago that so many of you would be listening now and enjoying it so much. So it's really, really lovely. So I'll just have a little skim back through the chat. Seems like a few of you that were in here before the technical difficulties have never made it back, which is a shame, but there's still a nice little bunch of you, so that's great. Lovely to see that Katie has popped in. I saw that Lily has popped in also. Just skimming through to see if I've missed anybody else. Oh, Newton Spider, a new name to the Foxy Book Club. It looks like they've headed off, so they probably will miss my welcome, but if they do go back and watch the recorded stream, they might see that little shout out. Did I miss anybody else, I wonder? And I won't chat and read too much longer today. Like I said, I wanted it just to be a little bit of a shorter one, and unfortunately we got broken off with those technical difficulties and wasted some time with that whole internet connection problem in the beginning, but you know, that can't be helped. I was just seeing what you were chatting about whilst I was reading. Yeah, can't be helped, but there will be a Foxy Book Club tomorrow, so we will definitely be having a couple more stories tomorrow. And I would just like to have a little brief reading now before I sign off, but not a long one, just 5 minutes. I think I'm just going to test out one of the George Orwells before I sign off today, because that was my plan, and I just don't want to let the internet connection silliness completely spoil my plans. But I will be heading off quite soon. Oh, and Tora Tiger made it in as well. Good stuff. Been lots of chat going on. And Maisel Beat has been back as well. Oh, sorry, Mabel's Beat has been back. You were in one of the other book clubs, and you've had to head off as well. But you said you're going to watch the whole stream later, so you should get this little shout out. Nice to see you, Mabel. To see you, nice. Oh, I'm glad you've been enjoying the chat, though, Newt and Spider. You've been very nicely welcomed in by the Fox fans, I see. I'm just still catching up a little bit with the chat, and then I'm going to just jump into a little bit of 1984, I think, just for 5 minutes. Oh, and hello to Brandon as well. You were saying hello. If you're still around, welcome, welcome. Nice to see you. Yeah, there was a little Lord of the Rings reference there, Colour Brights, with Worm Tongue. You were playing the drinking game. There was a few mistakes, particularly in the beginning there. I was just struggling to get warmed up, I think particularly with the internet connection thing as well. It was a bit frustrating there. But we got there. I'm just about caught up, I think. Tora was saying that you were lost, but now you're found. Good times. Yeah, and that was Katie popping in as well. I just missed you there when I was starting to read. Alright. I'm sure I've missed plenty more now. But, oh, and Logan's still hanging out as well. Yeah, they are daffodils in the background, yeah. Thanks to Maria, aka Galadriel, for getting the daffodils, and I couldn't help but putting them in the shot yesterday. I just thought it added to the Easter mood. They're very nice. Sorry for distracting you, Teresa. It's a nice problem to have. When will the next stream go up, Orange? Are you talking about when am I next streaming? This will be saved as a recorded stream, so this will be on my channel immediately. Like as soon as I log off, YouTube processes the video. So sometimes there can be a little bit of a delay in it getting up, and if it's been a very long stream, sometimes only the last couple of hours are available. But this stream will go up basically as soon as I finish today, and I am hoping to have a Foxy Book Club tomorrow as well. So no Pride and Prejudice today, Colour Brights. Maybe tomorrow, I will see. Tomorrow, I'm not quite sure what to go for. Probably some more of The Witches, as it's been very popular. And I was thinking maybe Pride and Prejudice. But, you know, we've got a couple of popular things on the go at the moment. So, I could always start with The Witches. I don't know, that might annihilate my vocal cords. But I could maybe start with The Witches. We'll see how it goes. And then put it up to the vote after that or something. See how it goes. Yeah, you hang on for 5 minutes, Jutang. I'll get on with it. Yeah, Claire was asking, what are you thinking of reading next? I was saying I'm just going to have a little 5-minute dip into 1984, just as a little practice run. And then I'm going to love you and leave you for today. As I said, it was going to be a little bit of a shorter stream. And unfortunately, we got messed around with the internet connection issue. I was just checking my notifications. And a little shout out to Kim. You were saying that you were rejoining me on Patreon. I so appreciate that, Kim. That's really, really, really kind of you. Thank you so much for that. And please, you never ever need to apologize. Like, and this goes out to any of you. Like, if you need to stop supporting for a time, honestly, don't worry about it. It's wonderful if you can support me, and if you've ever supported me on Patreon, or if you've ever sent me a donation through PayPal or anything, or on Twitch or whatever, that is just a wonderful thing. So if it's just a one-time thing, that's fantastic. You don't need to worry about if you need to stop supporting or whatever. Of course, it's sort of sad to see you go, so to speak, but I just really appreciate your support. And a shout out to Ghoulie as well for joining me on Patreon this afternoon during the stream. I hope it's Ghoulie and not Julie. Maybe it's Julie. It's an unusual spelling though. But thank you so much if you're hanging out and hearing this. I really appreciate it, and I will write to you later on this evening. Yeah, I was just saying, Lynette, maybe tomorrow, Pride and Prejudice. Maybe. I'm going to do the same voice for Shannon. I'm going to do the same voice, Shannon, for the head high witch. You've got to be consistent with these things. You've just got to knuckle down and put the work in, even if it does shred my vocal cords a little bit. I'm really looking forward to the next chapters of The Witches, actually. So, vocal cord destruction or not, she will be making a return in the next chapter. Yeah, that's not the idea, Shannon. Oh, yeah. Yeah, good thinking, Lynette. I'd not really been thinking about the horror short stories. Leave it with me. I was thinking of, originally when we were talking about that, I was thinking of trying them out on the book club, though. So, yeah, leave that with me. I'd let that slip my mind, actually. And Mango mentioning Wuthering Heights. Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre are certainly books that I would like to read at some point. I've mentioned them quite a lot of times. So, yeah. I won't start, I'm already saying that I'm wanting to start some George Orwell. So I'll try and just be careful not to start too many things at the same time. But just know that Wuthering Heights is definitely on the back burner, or at least being strongly considered. Thanks so much, Kim. Yeah, you've been with me for a very, very long time. It's fantastic. Oh, that's funny, Jake. Nice coincidence. Alright, so Claire was asking about my favourite book. That's a tough question. I'm absolutely loving The Lord of the Rings at the moment. Absolutely loving it. But that's a tough question. I'd have to give that some thought. And I won't ramble on too much longer just now. Let me just have some water as well. My mouth's a little bit dry today. And then, gonna do some live raw reading. The most raw of all the raw reading. From George Orwell's 1984. So, the mission here, I suppose, is for me to see if I can successfully read a book without getting sucked into the character voices. And also to hopefully do George Orwell proud, as I'm a big fan of 1984 and Animal Farm, and various other books of a similar genre. It's a bit a crisp black cover's okay, I suppose. I was just taking the dust cover off because it can be a little bit squeaky and sliding around. But yeah, it's one of these that has a plain cover underneath, but it's kind of pretty in its own way. But yeah, 2, do George Orwell proud, and 3, hopefully read in a way that you guys enjoy. But that seems to generally be a success. And I said I'll probably just read for 5 minutes. I might end up reading for slightly longer. The first chapter is quite long. So I'll just see how it goes. It'll be something in between 5 minutes of reading and the whole of chapter 1. It just depends how it goes. So, welcome to Odysseina as well. Thanks for dropping in. And I know you were saying that you were having some problems joining last week's streams, I believe. So, good job that you're here today. That's awesome. You've missed To Marry a Prince, and that reminds me to change the text. Yes, you've missed To Marry a Prince, but you can obviously rewind the stream, and when the stream finishes, you can rewatch that. But you are right on time for a little experiment. And I hope you Fox fans in the stream don't mind me starting yet another book. You know I find it fun trying lots of different things. I mean, at the end of the day, life is too short. Just in general, life is just too short. So, forgive me for wanting to try my hand at many, many different books and sometimes getting a little bit carried away and trying to spin 15 things at once. I don't know what more to say. Maybe that's enough. I'm just talking about the little text line at the top there. Yeah, maybe that's all I can say. So yeah, it obviously takes much, 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 much longer to narrate a book than it does to read it in a regular fashion, particularly if you're doing lots of editing and re-recording, trying to do the best possible job of something. So forgive me for getting so tempted to start so many different things. I like how you changed your name to Barbara in there as well. That's cool. And thanks so much for joining today. Take care now. Oh, Shannon, you just tried to remind me about the text as well. Thank you. Oh, and Lynette, thanks. Okay. Let's get started and let's see how it goes. The stream is looking just fine. So, like I said in the beginning, I'm going to try and read this calmly and in quite a neutral fashion. I really love the voice acting part of things and really focusing on trying to bring characters to life, whether in a fun way or in a serious way. But I just want to try and play this down a little bit and just see how it feels, really. So hopefully it's relaxing, so even though the subject matter could be interpreted as quite heavy, but it really depends on your mood, I think. I don't think it would have to be heavy for everyone. But let's hope that the reading style is relaxing. So for those of you that have listened to The Secret Garden, for example, hopefully, or Dracula maybe even, hopefully this will give you a similar feeling, even though we've got a different style of story. Yeah, Mama Fox will be disappointed. I don't know where she is today. Yeah, we had To Marry a Prince earlier in the stream, Mabel. So no more To Marry a Prince today, but it will be coming back on the book club, of course. So, this is George Orwell's 1984. Chapter 1. It was a bright, cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13. Winston Smith, his chin nuzzled into his breast in an effort to escape the vile wind, slipped quickly through the glass doors of Victory Mansions, though not quickly enough to prevent a swirl of gritty dust from entering along with him. The hallway smelt of boiled cabbage and old rag mats. At one end of it, a coloured poster, too large for indoor display, had been tacked to the wall. It depicted simply an enormous face, more than a metre wide. The face of a man of about 45, with a heavy black moustache and ruggedly handsome features. Winston made for the stairs. It was no use trying the lift. Even at the best of times it was seldom working, and at present the electric current was cut off during daylight hours. It was part of the economy drive in preparation for Hate Week. The flat was 7 flights up, and Winston, who was 39 and had a varicose ulcer above his right ankle, went slowly, resting several times on the way. On each landing, opposite the lift shaft, the poster with the enormous face gazed from the wall. It was one of those pictures which are so contrived that the eyes follow you about when you move. Big Brother is watching you, the caption beneath it ran. Inside the flat, a fruity voice was reading out a list of figures which had something to do with the production of pig iron. The voice came from an oblong metal plaque, like a dulled mirror, which formed part of the surface of the right-hand wall. Winston turned a switch, and the voice sank somewhat, though the words were still distinguishable. The instrument, the telescreen it was called, could be dimmed, but there was no way of shutting it off completely. He moved over to the window. A smallish, frail figure, the meagreness of his body merely emphasized by the blue overalls, which were the uniform of the party. His hair was very fair, his face naturally sanguine, his skin roughened by coarse soap and blunt razor blades, and the cold of the winter that had just ended. Outside, even through the shut window pane, the world looked cold. Down in the street, little eddies of wind were whirling dust and torn paper into spirals, and though the sun was shining and the sky a harsh blue, there seemed to be no colour in anything, except the posters that were plastered everywhere. The black, mustachioed face gazed down from every commanding corner. There was one on the house front immediately opposite. "Big Brother is watching you," the caption said, while the dark eyes looked deep into Winston's own. Down at street level, another poster, torn at one corner, flapped fitfully in the wind, alternately covering and uncovering the single word, Ingsoc. In the far distance, a helicopter skimmed down between the roofs, hovered for an instant like a bluebottle, and darted away again with a curving flight. It was the police patrol, snooping into people's windows. The patrols did not matter, however. Only the thought police mattered. Behind Winston's back, the voice from the telescreen was still babbling away about pig iron and the over-fulfillment of the 9th 3-year plan. The telescreen received and transmitted simultaneously. Any sound that Winston made above the level of a very low whisper would be picked up by it. Moreover, so long as he remained within the field of vision which the metal plaque commanded, he could be seen as well as heard. There was, of course, no way of knowing whether you were being watched at any given moment. How often, or on what system, the thought police plugged in on any individual wire was guesswork. It was even conceivable that they watched everybody all the time. But at any rate, they could plug in your wire whenever they wanted to. You had to live, did live, from habit that became instinct, in the assumption that every sound you made was overheard, and, except in darkness, every movement scrutinized. Winston kept his back turned to the telescreen. It was safer, though, as he well knew, even a back can be revealing. A kilometre away, the Ministry of Truth, his place of work, towered vast and white above the grimy landscape. This, he thought with a sort of vague distaste, this was London, chief city of Airstrip 1, itself the third most populous of the provinces of Oceania. He tried to squeeze out some childhood memory that should tell him whether London had always been quite like this. Were there always these vistas of rotting 19th century houses, their sides shored up with balks of timber, their windows patched with cardboard and their roofs with corrugated iron, their crazy garden walls sagging in all directions, and the bombed sites where the plaster dust swirled in the air and the willow herb straggled over the heaps of rubble, and the places where the bombs had cleared a larger patch, and there had sprung up sordid colonies of wooden dwellings like chicken houses. But it was no use. He could not remember. Nothing remained of his childhood except a series of bright-lit tableaux, occurring against no background and mostly unintelligible. The Ministry of Truth, mini-true in newspeak, was startlingly different from any other object in sight. It was an enormous pyramidal structure of glittering white concrete, soaring up, terrace after terrace, 300 metres into the air. From where Winston stood, it was just possible to read, picked out on its white face in elegant lettering, the 3 slogans of the party. War is peace. Freedom is slavery. Ignorance is strength. The Ministry of Truth contained, it was said, 3,000 rooms above ground level, and corresponding ramifications below. Scattered about London, there were just 3 other buildings of similar appearance and size. So completely did they dwarf the surrounding architecture that from the roof of Victory Mansions you could see all 4 of them simultaneously. They were the homes of the 4 ministries, between which the entire apparatus of government was divided. The Ministry of Truth, which concerned itself with news, entertainment, education, and the fine arts. The Ministry of Peace, which concerned itself with war. The Ministry of Love, which maintained law and order. And the Ministry of Plenty, which was responsible for economic affairs. Their names in newspeak: Mini-True, Mini-Pax, Mini-Love, and Mini-Plenty. The Ministry of Love was the really frightening one. There were no windows in it at all. Winston had never been inside the Ministry of Love, nor within half a kilometre of it. It was a place impossible to enter except on official business, and then only by penetrating through a maze of barbed wire entanglements, steel doors, and hidden machine gun nests. Even the streets leading up to its outer barriers were roamed by gorilla-faced guards in black uniforms, armed with jointed truncheons. Winston turned round abruptly. He had set his features into the expression of quiet optimism which it was advisable to wear when facing the telescreen. He crossed the room into the tiny kitchen. By leaving the ministry at this time of day, he had sacrificed his lunch in the canteen, and he was aware that there was no food in the kitchen except a hunk of dark-coloured bread, which had got to be saved for tomorrow's breakfast. He took down from the shelf a bottle of colourless liquid with a plain white label marked Victory Gin. It gave off a sickly, oily smell as of Chinese rice spirit. Winston poured out nearly a teacupful, nerved himself for a shock, and gulped it down like a dose of medicine. Instantly his face turned scarlet and the water ran out of his eyes. The stuff was like nitric acid, and moreover, in swallowing it, one had the sensation of being hit on the back of the head with a rubber club. The next moment, however, the burning in his belly died down, and the world began to look more cheerful. He took a cigarette from a crumpled packet marked Victory Cigarettes, and incautiously held it upright, whereupon the tobacco fell out onto the floor. With the next, he was more successful. He went back to the living room and sat down at a small table that stood to the left of the telescreen. From the table drawer he took out a pen holder, a bottle of ink, and a thick, quarto-sized blank book with a red back and a marbled cover. For some reason, the telescreen in the living room was in an unusual position. Instead of being placed, as was normal, in the end wall, where it could command the whole room, it was in the longer wall, opposite the window. To one side of it there was a shallow alcove in which Winston was now sitting, and which, when the flats were built, had probably been intended to hold bookshelves. By sitting in the alcove and keeping well back, Winston was able to remain outside the range of the telescreen, so far as sight went. He could be heard, of course, but so long as he stayed in his present position, he could not be seen. It was partly the unusual geography of the room that had suggested to him the thing that he was now about to do. But it also had been suggested by the book that he had just taken out of the drawer. It was a peculiarly beautiful book. Its smooth, creamy paper, a little yellowed by age, was of a kind that had not been manufactured for at least 40 years past. He could guess, however, that the book was much older than that. He had seen it lying in the window of a frowsy little junk shop in a slummy quarter of the town, just what quarter he did not now remember, and had been stricken immediately by an overwhelming desire to possess it. Party members were supposed not to go into ordinary shops. Dealing on the free market, it was called. But the rule was not strictly kept, because there were various things, such as shoelaces and razor blades, which it was impossible to get hold of in any other way. He had given a quick glance up and down the street, and then had slipped inside and bought the book for $2.50. At the time, he was not conscious of wanting it for any particular purpose. He had carried it guiltily home in his briefcase. Even with nothing written in it, it was a compromising possession. The thing that he was about to do was to open a diary. This was not illegal. Nothing was illegal, since there were no longer any laws. But if detected, it was reasonably certain that it would be punished by death, or at least by 25 years in a forced labour camp. Winston fitted a nib into the pen holder and sucked it to get the grease off. The pen was an archaic instrument, seldom used even for signatures, and he had procured one, furtively and with some difficulty, simply because of a feeling that the beautiful creamy paper deserved to be written on with a real nib, instead of being scratched with an ink pencil. Actually, he was not used to writing by hand. Apart from very short notes, it was usual to dictate everything into the speak-write, which was, of course, impossible for his present purpose. He dipped the pen into the ink, and then faltered for just a second. A tremor had gone through his bowels. To mark the paper was the decisive act. In small, clumsy letters, he wrote, April 4th, 1984. He sat back. A sense of complete helplessness had descended upon him. To begin with, he did not know with any certainty that this was 1984. It must be round about that date, since he was fairly sure that his age was 39, and he believed that he had been born in 1944 or 1945, but it was never possible nowadays to pin down any date within a year or two. For whom, it suddenly occurred to him to wonder, was he writing this diary? For the future? For the unborn? His mind hovered for a moment round the doubtful date on the page, and then fetched up with a bump against the newspeak word, doublethink. For the first time, the magnitude of what he had undertaken came home to him. How could you communicate with the future? It was, of its nature, impossible. Either the future would resemble the present, in which case it would not listen to him, or it would be different from it, and his predicament would be meaningless. For some time he sat gazing stupidly at the paper. The telescreen had changed over to strident military music. It was curious that he seemed not merely to have lost the power of expressing himself, but even to have forgotten what it was that he had originally intended to say. For weeks past he had been making ready for this moment, and it had never crossed his mind that anything would be needed except courage. The actual writing would be easy. All he had to do was to transfer to paper the interminable, restless monologue that had been running inside his head, literally for years. At this moment, however, even the monologue had dried up. Moreover, his varicose ulcer had been itching unbearably. He dared not scratch it, because if he did so, it always became inflamed. The seconds were ticking by. He was conscious of nothing except the blankness of the page in front of him, the itching of the skin above his ankle, the blaring of the music, and a slight booziness caused by the gin. Suddenly, he began writing in sheer panic, only imperfectly aware of what he was setting down. His small but childish handwriting straggled up and down the page, shedding first its capital letters, and finally even its full stops. April 4th, 1984. Last night to the flicks. All war films. One very good one of a ship full of refugees being bombed somewhere in the Mediterranean. Audience much amused by shots of a great huge fat man trying to swim away with a helicopter after him. First you saw him wallowing along in the water like a porpoise, then you saw him through the helicopter's gun sights, then he was full of holes, and the sea round him turned pink and he sank as suddenly as though the holes had let in the water. Audience shouting with laughter when he sank. Then you saw a lifeboat full of children with a helicopter hovering over it. There was a middle-aged woman, might have been a Jewess, sitting up in the bow, with a little boy, about 3 years old, in her arms. Little boy screaming with fright, and hiding his head between her breasts, as if he were trying to burrow right into her, and the woman putting her arms round him and comforting him, although she was blue with fright herself. All the time covering him up as much as possible, as if she thought her arms could keep the bullets off him. Then the helicopter planted a 20-kilo bomb in among the terrified Flash, and the boat went all to matchwood. Then there was a powerful shot of a child's arm going up, 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 right up into the air. A helicopter with a camera in its nose must have followed it up, and there was a lot of applause from the party seats, but a woman down in the prole part of the house suddenly started kicking up a fuss and shouting they didn't ought to show in front of kids these things. They didn't. It ain't right. Not in front of kids. It ain't until the police turned her out. I don't suppose anything happened to her. Nobody cares what the proles say. Typical prole reaction. They never... Winston stopped writing. partly because he was suffering from cramp. He did not know what had made him pour out this stream of rubbish. But the curious thing was that while he was doing so, a totally different memory had clarified itself in his mind, to the point where he almost felt equal to writing it down. It was, he now realized, because of this other incident that he had suddenly decided to come home and begin the diary today. It had happened that morning at the ministry, if anything so nebulous could be said to happen. It was nearly 1100, and the records department where Winston worked. They were dragging the chairs out of the cubicles and grouping them in the centre of the hall, opposite the big telescreen, in preparation for the 2 minutes hate. Winston was just taking his place in one of the middle rows when two people whom he knew by sight but who had never spoken to came unexpectedly into the room. One of them was a girl whom he often passed in the corridors. He did not know her name, but he knew that she worked in the fiction department. Presumably, since he had sometimes seen her with oily hands and carrying a spanner, she had some mechanical job on one of the novel-writing machines. She was a bald-looking girl, of about 27, with thick dark hair, a freckled face, and swift athletic movements. A narrow scarlet sash, emblem of the Junior Anti-Sex League, was wound several times round the waist of her overalls, just tightly enough to bring out the shapeliness of her hips. Winston had disliked her from the very first moment of seeing her. He knew the reason. It was because of the atmosphere of hockey fields and cold baths and community hikes and general clean-mindedness which she managed to carry about with her. He disliked nearly all women, and especially the young and pretty ones. It was always the women, and above all the young ones, who were the most bigoted adherents of the party, the swallowers of slogans, the amateur spies and nosers out of unorthodoxy. But this particular girl gave him the impression of being more dangerous than most. Once, when they passed in the corridor, she had given him a quick sidelong glance which seemed to pierce right into him, and for a moment had filled him with black terror. The idea had even crossed his mind that she might be an agent of the thought police. That, it was true, was very unlikely. Still, he continued to feel a peculiar uneasiness, which had fear mixed up in it as well as hostility, whenever she was anywhere near him. The other person was a man named O'Brien, a member of the inner party, and holder of some post so important and remote that Winston had only a dim idea of its nature. A momentary hush passed over the group of people round the chairs as they saw the black overalls of an inner party member approaching. O'Brien was a large, burly man, with a thick neck and a coarse, humorous, brutal face. In spite of his formidable appearance, he had a certain charm of manner. He had a trick of resettling his spectacles on his nose which was curiously disarming, in some indefinable way, curiously civilized. It was a gesture which, if anyone had still thought in such terms, might have recalled an 18th century nobleman offering his snuff-box. Winston had seen O'Brien perhaps a dozen times in almost as many years. He felt deeply drawn to him, and not solely because he was intrigued by the contrast between O'Brien's urbane manner and his prize-fighter's physique. Much more, it was because of a secretly held belief. Or perhaps not even a belief, merely a hope, that O'Brien's political orthodoxy was not perfect. Something in his face suggested it irresistibly. And again, perhaps it was not even unorthodoxy that was written in his face, but simply intelligence. But at any rate, he had the appearance of being a person that you could talk to, if somehow you could cheat the telescreen and get him alone. Winston had never made the smallest effort to verify this guess. Indeed, there was no way of doing so. At this moment, O'Brien glanced at his wristwatch, saw that it was nearly 1100, and evidently decided to stay in the records department until the 2 minutes hate was over. He took a chair in the same row as Winston, a couple of places away. A small sandy-haired woman who worked in the next cubicle to Winston was between them. The girl with dark hair was sitting immediately behind. The next moment, a hideous, grinding speech, as of some monstrous machine running without oil, burst from the big telescreen at the end of the room. It was a noise that set one's teeth on edge and bristled the hair at the back of one's neck. The hate had started. As usual, the face of Emmanuel Goldstein, the enemy of the people, had flashed onto the screen. There were hisses here and there among the audience. The little sandy-haired woman gave a squeak of mingled fear and disgust. Goldstein was the renegader and backslider who once, long ago, how long ago nobody quite remembered, had been one of the leading figures of the party, almost on a level with Big Brother himself, and then had engaged in counter-revolutionary activities, had been condemned to death, and had mysteriously escaped and disappeared. The programme of the 2 minutes hate varied from day to day, but there was none in which Goldstein was not the principal figure. He was the primal traitor, the earliest defiler of the party's purity. All subsequent crimes against the party, all treacheries, acts of sabotage, heresies, deviations, sprang directly out of his teaching. Somewhere or other he was still alive, and hatching his conspiracies. Perhaps somewhere beyond the sea, under the protection of his foreign paymasters. Perhaps even, so it was occasionally rumoured, in some hiding place in Oceania itself. I'm going to pause there, Fox fans. Sorry to leave you on a bit of a cliffhanger. But there's still a few pages to go in that first chapter, and I don't want to overdo it too much and run too much over time today. So we're about approximately halfway through the chapter, so it's not a terrible stopping point, and I was just flicking ahead as I was reading there, and I couldn't see a better one. So, thank you for listening to the first half of the first chapter of George Orwell's infamous novel, 1984. I really hope you enjoyed it. thanks so much to Mabel for expressing your enjoyment there. It's always a good thing if you don't want it to stop. Thanks so much, Colour Brights. Thanks very much, Mango. I bumbled a couple of words here and there, but nothing too serious, I don't think. And the part where Winston is writing in his diary, it is very strangely written, that, like, particularly the second half of it. So I think I might have got a couple of the words in the wrong order actually at one point, because it's quite tricky to read as well. I think especially live when you've not practiced it, but you can't really see it too clearly, unfortunately. But as it says at the start, he starts dropping capital letters, full stops, and even, I think, commas near the end. So the last, I think about 15 lines, there's no punctuation whatsoever. From where it says, then the helicopter planted a 20-kilo bomb in among them, terrific flash, and the boat went all to matchwood. That's all one sentence with no commas or capitals or anything. And then after that, those next, I guess it's about 10, 11 lines, there isn't even a full stop. So it is a real, like, train of thought. Someone who's obviously rather petrified and not at all used to writing anymore, or if ever, and not really sure quite what he's doing, but he feels deep down there's a need for some kind of rebellion. More will be revealed. Yeah, great story, Logan. It was a serious reading, Lynette, for sure. But that's kind of what I was meaning, Olivia, at the beginning. That although it is a distressing subject matter, as you say, that it can be read in a way where it can be strangely relaxing, I think. So glad you're enjoying it. Definitely a great book, Katie. And yeah, the author of The Hunger Games has taken influences from all over the place, not just 1984. I mean, there's still original aspects in there, of course, but there's things taken from, I would say, Battle Royale and many, many books. 1984, certainly. And thanks very much. Yeah, written or published in 1948. And I think, like, some of the things that we come across here, helicopters, surveillance, basically closed circuit television, all sorts of, there's a few other technological things that we come across here and there, and certain ways of thinking that were far, far beyond the time in many ways. It's like a Da Vinci level of foresight in some ways. Really, really great. Glad you're enjoying the raw style, Olivia. Yeah, and that's nice, Lynette. Sounds good. Sounds like it's working well. Thanks, Orange. Yeah, that's nice. That's nice. Thanks, Mango. Yeah. Yeah, it's all practice, Shannon. Yeah, like I said, I think I only made maybe one mistake in that big block of his writing, but it is written in a very odd sense anyway, so it didn't make too much difference. You got the feeling, I think. Yeah, Battle Royale is pretty immense. It really is. Yeah, no worries, Jake. Yeah, it must have been Mabel. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for joining me in today's book club. It's been an absolute pleasure. Sorry about those technical difficulties in the beginning, and that this video will now be split into 2 bits on YouTube, unfortunately. It's just a bit of a pain, but nothing I could do. It just seems like there was some internet connection issues. So, yeah, it's just one of those things. What can you do? But I think it's been a lovely book club, very leisurely. We had a very hectic one with the witches yesterday, which was an awful lot of fun. But I like trying different things, different styles as well. So I think it's been really nice to have a sort of calm, relaxing book club. I hope you've enjoyed it. Foxy Book Club. Yeah. And I mean, it's amazing, really, because it's 48. So, the Cold War has technically not even begun. We're just wrapping up the Second World War. But I mean, he was a very smart chap. I forget his actual name, which is a bit embarrassing. George Orwell was a pseudonym. Can't just think. Maybe one of you will let me know. Strange how it doesn't even write it in the back of the book here. I don't know if it's mentioned in the introduction. Just refers to him as Orwell. I don't know if it mentions it somewhere. Maybe it does. Yeah, but many influences from the politics and wars of the time. All right, everybody. You take care now. Stay foxy. I hope the rest of your day, evening, or night goes smoothly. It's a pleasure to spend a couple of hours with you, as always. Thanks to you all for dropping in. And I hope to see you on the next book club tomorrow. So have a think about what you'd like to hear if I do throw that question at you. Eric Arthur Blair. There you go. Mabel right behind. Thank you. Good stuff. Ever the encyclopedia, Shannon. Good stuff. All right, Fox fans. I hope to see you tomorrow. Look after yourselves. And read to you soon. Hope to see you tomorrow. Goodbye, everybody. Until next time. Cheers.